Hello, I'm David Kelley, and welcome to another episode of Becoming Competitive. In this episode, I want to talk about post-game analysis. So you've just played a game, you've finished it, and how are you going to break that game down? Now, this is something you're probably not going to do in a tournament setting, but more in your practice, because this is when you have the ability to actually take the time to spend maybe 10 minutes thinking about a game or longer than that. So the first thing you need to look at, or the first thing I look at, is what did my setup look like? Now, a lot of people will jump straight to rocks, but there's actually a step before that that needs to be considered, and that's player one versus player two. Now, you've built your list. You can't change that at this step, right? Your list is your list. However, a lot of players, even if they have a bid, especially if they have a bid, a lot of players will just automatically assume being player two is better. And this is a habit you need to break. Being player two is not always better, and there are some very specific examples I'm going to give you. So the first one is, this is a list I flew a long time ago, but it was PS1 Defender, Soontir Vader, right? I've got a PS1, and I've got two sixes. Now, naturally, I probably want my sixes to move last, but if there's no sixes in the opponent's list, do I care that much about whether I go first or second? And the fact of the matter is, yes, because I have a PS1. My opponent has a PS1 and no sixes, I probably am going to want to take initiative there, especially if I'm flying a defender. If I have a defender and it gets blocked, that's terrible. I just lost two actions, my evade and my focus. In addition to that, having the PS1 is my blocker, so I don't want his blockers blocking my blocker. I want to block his blockers, if that makes sense. So a lot of the time, the high PS won't matter, but the low PS really will. And I do see people make this mistake a little bit. And then you also got to look at how important is your ace. And by this I mean, say I'm running a list like Psy, Echo Vader, because that's what I've been running lately. My Psy is a PS3. I've got a PS4 and a PS6. I don't really care if my PS6 goes first or last. And I've got the PS3. So if there's an initiative problem at PS3, my shuttle getting its actions are incredibly important. So I may choose, if I for some reason got to choose that choice, to give my opponent player 2 and I take player 1, just to make sure my shuttle, if there was a issue at PS3 that he had a bunch of PS3s, so my shuttle got to move first so I know it would land. And my big point here is, don't assume being player 2 is better. Look back at the game and just kind of analyze, did I choose the right player? And this doesn't come up all the time. In fact, this is one of the I don't know what the word is. This is one of the scenarios, I guess, where this occurs so infrequently, but it occurs just enough that it matters. I'd say 1 in 10 games, maybe 1 in 15 games, is the lower PS the most important part of choosing initiative. But just always go back and look at this, because a lot of players will look over it. Now, the next thing is going to be rock placement. Man, I should have looked up some links to... There's been some good rock discussion. I know Heaver did a discussion on this maybe 3 years ago. It's somewhere out there. But go over your rock placement. Did you bring the right rocks for your list? And this is an important thing to look back on, because your rock selection may change as the meta changes. When I first started flying Psy Echo Vader, I was bringing 3 big rocks, because at the time there was no Nantex, and my local meta, and essentially the meta on my area, like regionally, there was not a lot of swarms with struts. There was not a lot of vultures or whatever sitting on rocks. So in the meta, the rocks were a really good choice for me because they punished other people more than me, and I didn't mind. But as soon as enemies started bringing ships that wanted to land on rocks and Nantex that could tractor me onto rocks, rocks became a very bad thing for my list. So after about 80 games into my practice, the meta changed, and I was like, you know what? I got to switch over to gas clouds. It's just safer for me. So I made that switch. So look at your rocks, one, your rock selection, but two, your rock placement. After you played the game, look back at your rocks and go, man, for whatever reason, that little cluster on my side of the board gave me a lot of trouble. Why was that? And think about why it was. And if it was just a strategy error on your side, okay, maybe there's another part of the game. But if you look at that and go, man, rock clusters on my side of the board, just for the way my list functions, are really bad, I need to try and, in placement, make sure the cluster is either on their side of the board or we're getting a spread. Whatever it is, just look at the rocks, at least reflect on it for a little bit and just be like, man, is there a way I could avoid whatever happened with the rock placement? Because the reality is, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But at least look back at it. And then ship placement. Did you put your ships in a good formation? Did you fly in a formation when you should have been spread out? Just like think about your actual placement of ships. And in this part too, I feel like not enough people actually plan turns 2 and 3 in their heads. So the perfect example is the defender. It's gonna, most of the time, 3 straight, 5 straight, 3 bank on approaches. Like that's how it wants to go. Well, when you're setting that defender down, you don't want to put it in a spot where I'm going to 3 straight and then I have to 3 straight the next turn because I won't be able to turn. So when you're placing those ships, make sure you're setting it up so like you know your ship is going to have a lane. If the enemy goes straight at me, I can do this. If the enemy goes this direction, I can do this. And preset, have your ship there so you know, all right, I'm going to go straight. And then I'm going to be able to make the 3 hard left. Yep. I'm going to be able to make the 3 bank. Yep. I can go straight. Awesome. He's got everything he can on turn 2. And then if you're visually capable of seeing those 3 options to turn 2, see if your turn 3 is available. Now, I know a lot of players have trouble visualizing the ship placements that far in advance. That's just something you got to practice. But if you can envision, all right, he's got this path. He's got 3 straight, 3 hard right. He's got 3 straight, 3 bank left, 3 bank right. He's got 3 straight, 4K. He's got 3 straight, 3 hard left. And in this spot, it'll work. In this spot, I can't do most of my K turns on turn 3, so I need to move him 3 inches left. Like, those are things you should be thinking about. So maybe it's not the looking back. Maybe it's just reminding yourself on setup. Plan out your turns to the first 2 or 3 rounds. Like, make sure you're able to go through the rocks if you need to. Make sure you've got alleyways that you can get to effectively. Just something to reflect on. Because if you look at that at the end of the game, when you start your next game, it'll start triggering, oh, I need to remember this. And then with your ship placement, if you find yourself using the same ship placement over and over and over, ask yourself why. Is it just because that's how you saw the list flown? Maybe you should try the other ones. So go through some of that. Just figure out why you're doing what you're doing. And if you don't know why you put a ship in a certain place, that's something you should figure out. You should have a reason for what you're doing. If you don't have a reason for what you're doing, try different things until you figure out why it is you're doing it. Because if you don't know, that's a problem. Because knowing means you have more information, which means you can make decisions based on that information. Not knowing means you don't know why you were wrong if you were wrong, and you don't know why you were right if you were right. So just try and think about how you're placing your ships and why you're doing it. The why is the important part there. And then this is the biggest thing is, did I have a plan of attack before the game started? And so this comes down to, I looked at his list, I noticed X was terrifying, and I either needed to avoid it or kill it. And those were my two options. So how am I going to kill it? If it's a Sloan swarm, and say he's got Sloan on a shuttle or a Reaper or something, and he's got 5 or 6 ships between you and Sloan, killing Sloan may not be the correct answer, because jumping through all of his ships to get it means you'll take too much damage. So maybe in your head you've got to try and figure out, how do I get to this guy? How do I do it? Which of my ships can take the 2 stress if I kill something of his? Basically, you just need to make sure you have a plan of attack. If you just put your ships on the board and charge, that's not a plan. That's just you joust. And if you're finding yourself always jousting, take a step back and think about, why am I jousting? Should I be jousting? Is my list the better jousting list? If it's not, maybe I shouldn't be jousting. If it is, maybe I should be jousting, but maybe I need to joust it a better way. Maybe I need to have my target selection better. So just try and make sure you're having a plan or formulating a plan. And then look back. If you had the plan, and hopefully you did, because we are trying to be competitive players, and as a competitive player, you need to have your goals before the game starts of how you want to engage them. So look back. Did your plan work? If it did, why did it work? How did it work? Is it a repeatable thing? Did it just luck into it? Did you luck into it, I guess, or did you set it up so it had to happen that way? And try and think about that, and then try and think about other plans. Because maybe your plan worked great, but maybe it only worked great because all 4 of your ships got to shoot round 1 and only 1 of his did. Maybe it was purely a mistake on his part. He misjudged something. So think about it. If your opponent had made a slightly better decision, maybe if he'd 4-strated all his ships instead of just 3-strating, and all of his ships could shoot back, would it have ended the same? So go through those things and think about it. So that's just looking at the setup. And it's just, did I pick player initiative right, if you even have a choice? Was the rock placement good? Was my ship placement good? And did I have a plan of attack? Once you go through those questions, now we're going to go to the actual game itself. And this is the first question I always ask myself is, did I fuck something up? Not what did my opponent do, what did I do? And the biggest part of being a competitive player is recognizing you need to be in control of the game. Now, sometimes you can't be. Sometimes you run into a list that's going to beat you 99 out of 100 times just because it hard counters you. That sucks. But you can't look at it that way. You got to look at it as, did I do everything in my ability to win the game? You may still lose the game, but did you do what you needed to do? Right? Because we got to look at ourselves here. We're the ones making the decisions. All right, you took a list that had a hard counter that kills you 99% of the time. Guess whose fault that is? That's you. You chose that list to begin with. Sorry. You could have chosen to bring that guy's list. That was an option you had, but you didn't. So now once you've made the decision to bring your list, in the game, what could you have done better? So did you screw something up? Did you approach right? Did you leave a ship out of shot? Did you miss a ship? Did you forget a trigger? Did any of those things happen that could cause you to lose the game? All right, so go through those, figure out what you did wrong. Because I'm going to tell you right now, whether you won the game or lost the game, you did something wrong in the game. Period. Now, it may be a minor thing. It may be something that even in watching a VOD back, you can't figure out what you screwed up. But I'm sure you did something that could have been done slightly better. And try and figure out what that was. Now you need to actually look into the game itself. If you lost, why did you lose? Did you lose because his list hard counters you and you're probably supposed to lose? And then if that's the case, if you are supposed to lose, look at how did you lose, right? Because there's a difference between a 200-0 and a 200-100. Like if we're in a tournament that MOV matters, okay, I'm going into this game. I know I'm probably going to lose. Did I get the most out of my loss, right? Did I make the correct decision to sell out, kill his Falcon, and get those extra 60 points, or did I just run away and let him kill me slowly? Like, think about that. Um, if you lost, how did you lose and why? And then if you lost, why did you lose? Did your opponent do something great? Did you mess up? Did you have a lead and throw the lead away? And why did you throw that lead away? I see a lot of players, they'll get a nice lead and then they'll like get bloodthirsty. And that bloodthirst, they'll start making reckless decisions. And guess what? They make one reckless decision instead of a slightly more conservative decision. It costs them 2 health. And then all of a sudden, it costs them another 2 health the next turn. And now they've given up half points on their 90-point ship. And they're like, oh God, the game's now a game again. So go back and look at that. Like, did you throw away your lead? Did your opponent throw away his lead? Did you even win the game? Like, maybe your opponent had he outplayed you so hard in the first 3 rounds that you should have lost the game, but then he got overconfident and did something stupid and you won. So did you really win the game? I mean, yeah, at the end of the day you won, but why did you win? Did you win because your opponent just turned into a bad player halfway through the game and let you win? So look at that kind of stuff. Make sure you're analyzing the how and the why. Because there's a lot of games I win where I felt like my opponent should have won. Because they outplayed me in the beginning, and for whatever reason, they made some critical mistakes later that let me come back. But if they hadn't made those critical mistakes, they would just stomp me. So make sure you're going through those, figuring out why it happened. Now, this is the big one, and this is where, notice so far I have not brought dice up. I've gone through all this analysis, and I haven't brought the dice up. And that's because the dice honestly aren't going to play a large role in a lot of games. Now, they are going to play a role in some games, don't get me wrong. But in a lot of games, they won't play a role. So I want the dice to be one of the last things I'm looking at. Like, was my strategy good? Did I engage well? Were my rocks placed well? Did I have the correct plan of attack? Did I throw away a lead? Did I give up a lead? Just throw away a lead and give up a lead are the same thing. So I'm really good at English there. But I'm going through all these questions before I get to dice. And I don't even want to really say, did the dice betray me, so much as I want to look at it more like this. Did something weird happen? Now I've got the dice calculator up because I want to figure out what weird is here. So to me, weird is something that I could play 100 games and not see happen, right? Or 20 games and it maybe only happens once. Like something where I can be confident that it's not a normal thing. So to me, the perfect example here is, all right, initial engagement. For whatever reason, one of my opponent's X-Wings got a little far forward. You know, he dialed in a 4 straight instead of a 3 straight. It jumped out ahead, or he did it on purpose because he wanted that X-Wing to be the blocker next round, not thinking I could get a shot on him. But I noticed it was ahead, and I was like, ooh, I could barrel my Vader after doing my 5 straight. All of a sudden, we've got a shot. Now, it's going to be range 3 through a rock, and he's got a focus. But Vader versus a X-Wing, range 3 through a rock, Vader's got a huge advantage there. I've got modifications on offense, ×2, and I've got modifications on defense. That X-Wing can only modify its offense or defense, and only with a focus. So Vader's hugely favored there. So Vader shoots, range 3 through a rock, modifies to 3 hits, or 2 hits and a crit, whatever it is, modifies to that. The defender rolls his dice and rolls evade, focus, focus, blank. The X-Wing player, being the smart chap he is, and having watched my first video, goes, I'm going to spend that focus, and takes no damage. Now that X-Wing fires back at Vader. Well, he's firing naked, range 3 through a rock. So one thing I want to look at is just, what are his odds to actually get any damage? Well, he's only going to roll 3 hits 12% of the time. So 1 in 8 attacks, he'll have 3 hits. Okay. 1 in 8 attacks, he'll have nothing. 3 out of 8, he'll have 1 hit, and 3 out of 8, he'll have 2 hits. So the reality is he's not going to do a ton of damage to me, more likely than not. And that's with me having no agility. Now, I've got 5 agility dice because I'm 3 through a rock. I didn't spend my focus on offense, so I still have 1. Now we rerun this, and guess what? He doesn't hit me, right? Like, he's never dealing damage to me here. But the fact of the matter is, I rolled my 5 dice on this attack in this game, and I rolled 5 blanks. So this X-Wing did 3 damage to my Vader first round of combat in a situation where he basically shouldn't have done anything. And so this is what I mean, did something weird happen? So this is the very first turn of the game. These 2 ships get to take some pot shots, and for whatever reason, the X-Wing took no damage, and your Lord Vader, all hail him, took 3 damage. Well, the odds of that, right there, 0.09%. We're going to round that to 0.1. So 1 in 1,000 times, essentially, your Vader takes 3 damage. 1 in 1,000 times that a naked X-Wing shooting range 3 through a rock will deal 3 damage to Vader. 1 in 1,000. Okay? So, if that was the first thing that happened in the game, is that something important? Right? Like, I'm running an 80-point Vader. I just gave my opponent 60% of my Vader. 60%. I just gave it to him right there. Is that my fault? No, that's not my fault. That's a weird thing. That's insane. Now, this is where, in a tournament, if this happens, you need to get over it. You need to say, well, that fucking sucked. Now I had to really kill this guy. Okay? This is one of those things that in a practice game, you look at it and you go, that's the weirdest thing. That should never happen. And it shouldn't. It happens 1 in 1,000 times. So it should happen 1 in 1,000 games, but it's not something you care about. I don't care the outcome of this game, especially if the next round I was planning on committing Vader hard in his face. Well, in this case, Vader's probably going to die. But the reality is I can't put too much stock in what happened in this game because a 1 in 1,000 thing decided to just throw the game in a weird direction. But after that, did I give up? And this is a question you really need to ask. So Vader took, 3 damage. It's terrible. Probably shouldn't have happened, but it did. But did I give up? Because go back through your brain and think, how many games have I played with Vader that he actually ended the game at full health? Probably a good number, especially if you're a competitive player and you've been winning. I can't tell you how often my aces end games basically unscratched. It's a good amount. So if I lose 3 health, does that mean the game's over? No, it does not mean the game's over. It means my opponent has a significant advantage, but it does not mean the game's over. So you got to get over it in your head, and you got to think, did I give up when that happened? And this is after the game. Go back in your head and think, did I mentally give up? Or did I say, this sucks, now using this new information, can my plan of attack work? Well, it's still the best thing I got, so let's execute it. Or, well, if I do that, I'm probably going to just die, but if I do this other thing, I might be able to get out and at least get Vader in a good spot to do something the rest of the game, so let's do that instead. And go back in your mind. Make sure you thought in that moment in the game, did you give up or did you just get angry? Did you not even care about your dials that turn? Because if you didn't care about your dials, that's a you thing. Yeah, that random thing sucked, and it sucks that your Vader took a bunch of damage, but what did you do after that? And this is the important thing. And this is where variance, I'm at fault for this. Every player I've ever known that's played X-Wing is at fault for this. The variance happens. And the problem with me, I know the odds of this. I don't know if it's 1 in 1,000 right on top of my head. But my rough, napkin math in the back of my brain goes, man, that was like a 1 in 800 or a 1 in 1,200. Like, I'm in the ballpark of, Jesus, I can't believe that just happened to me. I'm in the top 16 of a system open, and that's how I open the game? Are you kidding me? And believe it or not, this occurred to me in the decider game at Nationals. My 4-0 game, so if I win one more, I'm in the cut. My Vader took 3 damage first round of shooting. And in the back of my head, I was like, that's got to be a 1 in like 800 or something crazy. Like, I knew it. I knew it instantly. But I got over it. I played the game. I didn't give up, and I won that game. So go back and think, did something weird happen? What was it? And after the game, write down. Go home. Figure it out. Because guess what? Knowing it's a 1 in 1,000 is helpful. Now, maybe that 1 in 1,000 causes you to lose the game. But now we're going back. Did I throw away a lead? Did my opponent throw away a lead? No, he still won the game because he probably should have after that opening. But did I get as maximum points? Because maybe the MOV matters for whatever you're in. Maybe top 2 in faction get a prize. Maybe top 8 in faction. Maybe you're sitting on the 4-2 bubble, but 4-2s can make top 8 at the system open in faction and get a nice prize. Maybe that's what you're playing for. So maybe the MOV matters there. So go back and think, after that weird thing happened, did I play as well as I could with what the dice provided? And did I get the extra 50 MOV? Maybe I got 140 MOV instead of the 90 that I would have gotten if I'd just given up. So go back and think about those things. And then, your opponent. Now, there's a few things I want to talk about with your opponent. Number 1, what were your opponent's thoughts? Ask them. All right, what were you scared of? Like, at what point in the game was it scary for you? On this turn, you took like 3 minutes with your dials, which is 2 minutes longer than you normally take. Could you tell me what you were thinking about? Right? Ask your opponents these type of questions. Like, we're knowing dice. Like, what were you thinking about? Why did it take you so long? Maybe it's something obvious that you knew. He was in a weird spot. But maybe it was a spot where you were like, I know what I'm doing. Why the hell does he, why is he taking so long? What's his issue? Ask him. Because maybe you were presenting a problem that you didn't even see you were presenting, but his thoughts on it will be like, oh, I didn't even realize I could have done that. But in his mind, he knew, man, this is my best move, but if he does this, he blocks it, and I just lose. Maybe that's something you want to think about doing in the future. And then, I don't want to... Alright, this last one is very important. But I do not want this to be a derogatory thing. So, I don't want anyone to take this as a derogatory thing or use it against someone as a derogatory thing. But you need to ask yourself, what is the quality of your opponent? Okay? And this is going to impact like a lot of your local play, or maybe even your play at a regional or a system open if you're analyzing those games. But this is mostly going to be your practice games. So what is the quality of your opponent? And I don't mean this to be rude, but every locality, every store, you've got your competitive players, you've got your guys that want to be competitive, you've got your guys that only care about fun, you've got your guys that only care about memeing, and you've got your guys that try their hardest and just lose a lot. All these things are true, and that's fine. For every person that wins, someone has to lose. That's the way it works. But the quality of your opponent does matter in your practice. There's a lot of games I play that maybe my opponent's playing a fun list. Maybe they're a good player, but they're playing a crappy list. So, in my mind, I'm going, man, I've got 90 games with my list. My opponent's a pretty good player, but they're playing a bad list. It's purely a meme list. Like, they're just having fun with it. They're not taking the game that seriously. And it's the first time they've played the list ever. So I've got these 4 factors where I'm a better player than them. It's a fun list. They're not taking the game seriously, and it's the first time they've played the list. I should win that game. If I lose the game, now I need to start asking myself questions. Why did I lose? How did I lose? Is their list better than I thought it was? And go into that sort of analysis. But the reality is, in that situation, if I told you that, those were the parameters, you should win that game a huge portion of the time. I'm talking like high 90% portion of the time. So when you win that game, don't consider that a good win. Don't be like, yeah, I'm now 15-0, undefeated. Well, sure, but how many of those games that you won were just like that? How many of them were actual competitive games where both players had a real chance to win? And again, I don't want to degrade the non-competitive players and whatnot, but the fact of the matter is, if you're going to be a competitive player, you need to think about this. Because not all games are going to be competitive practice for you. And that's just true. That doesn't mean you can't get something out of it, but if you're playing a player that's only been playing the game 2 months, is still trying to figure out how the game works and what's a good list and what's not, and that kind of stuff, I mean, I'm not there to murder that guy. I may have to if I play him, but that's not the goal. So in that point, just you got to take stock of that sort of a game. And then, what is the quality of the practice of your opponent also? Because I've found, and this is kind of different, but a lot of players I play with, I break down the games in my head afterwards, and I'll ask them a question or two, but some of them won't ask me anything. And especially if you're friends with these people, talk to them about their list, if they want to. But ask them a question. Get them to ask you a question about how your list engaged or something they were curious about. Because your thoughts to your opponent are going to help them. And hint, hint, surprise, surprise, if your opponents locally get better, it helps you get better too. Because better practice means you get better. So, these are a lot of the things I go through when I break down a win. Not all these things do I think about every game. Heck, some games I just go out there and my mission is just to play. I don't care about breaking it down. I just want to get the mechanics in my list down. Sometimes that's what I'm doing. But most of the time, I'm going through this after games. Trying to figure out what I did wrong, how I did it, whether the win was truly a win. Because sometimes you'll win a game and you shouldn't have won. Maybe the dice gave it to you. Maybe your opponent did something stupid. I mean, he flew a ship off the board after he'd won the game. Okay. I had a game won in a regional one time, and I just flew one of my ships off the board completely by accident. Did not mean to do it, but I was like, oh, shit. Well, there goes my 110-point ship. Okay. Good game, sir. But go through all this. Think about it. And if you've never thought about this stuff, start. You'll be surprised what you'll see and discover. But anyway, I'm Dave. This is another episode of Becoming Competitive. I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good day.